Hello everyone. So as we come to chapter number B1, that is the first chapter in section B, the title is Rural and Agrarian Structure, and it has two subtopics in it. And this chapter is very important from the standpoint that every year, almost every year, a lot of questions come from this topic directly or indirectly, and which are again very repetitive in nature, which are very doable if you prepare good answers beforehand. So the first subtopic is idea of Indian villages and village studies. So here a very famous question comes that there was a colonial. So there are basically two views of Indian villages. First view is regarding the colonial view, which was given by Charles Metcalfe and Maine Munro, that Indian villages are monolithic, atomistic, and atomistic. So this was an idea of colonial scholars, which has been largely very debated. And this question comes as it is in exam, that what do you mean by like little republics? They use the term little republics. Indian villages are little republics, or atomistic and monolithic. So you have to have an understanding of what they were talking about. That their view was basically that Indian villages was stagnating, they were self-sufficient, and they didn't had interaction with other villages. They were self-sustaining in themselves. However, this idea has been contradicted by numerous scholars, like M.N. Srinivas contested this idea, that there were pilgrimage which were happening, there were cross cultural exchanges through economic exchanges between two villages, because services were being exchanged by different caste groups in different villages, according to studies which were by Srinivas. Then even Andre Bhete has talked about kinship networks across the villages. A.R. Desai had talked about that how cities and villages coexisted. So both the views you have to know, the colonial view as well, and what have been the criticism of the same and the defense by Indian scholars. So this is a very important question. You can prepare a good answer on it. Also, you have to know the view of Gandhian view of Indian villages. He had a socialistic view of Indian villages, that they were self-sustaining and they were in itself good. Like it had a lot of good things in its Shramdan traditional view, lot of things. Similarly, you have to an idea of what Dr. Ambedkar thought about on Indian villages. He gave a call that there is an element of cultural stagnation in villages, that a lot of practices which are discriminatory are happening. So he gave a call to go to cities. Then you have to have a view of what Marx had talked about in Indian villages. So this is the in total view you have to have when it comes to idea of Indian villages. Then when we look into the topic of village studies, so essentially whole of Indian sociology, if you emphasize on field view. So earlier we had talked about how there is a book view, which is largely what Indology talked about, and there is a second which is field view, which was propagated or pioneered by M.N. Srinivas. So lot of work, lot of themes of Indian sociology have emanated from village studies, in fact, because it is said that India lives in its villages. So when you talk about village studies, you have to understand we are talking about village studies in caste. So you have to know the work of M.N. Srinivas in Rampura village. Dominant caste concept came from there, or M.S.A. Rao, F.G. Bailey, he talked about factional politics. Then you have to know village studies from the lens of class. So for example, Daniel Thurner, you have to, a very important thinker, Malik Kisan Mazdoor, that classification which he has given. Then Kathleen Gough, Anand Chakrabarti has also talked about how dynamics played in power structure in villages. Then you have to also have a lens on how Jajmani relations were there in villages, which was talked about by Oscar Lewis and Harold de Gaulle. Then you have to also see villages are also important in the sense that how developmental programs by state post independence had their impact. So this has been studied by different scholars, like S.C. Dubey has studied it. impact through development, and impact of cooperatives have been studied. So you have to have a view of, when we talk about village studies, you have to have a sense of all of this, that on different themes what have been the village studies, who have been the scholars involved, what villages they studied, what were the outcomes, and in the contemporary trend also, as Dipankar Gupta has talked about, that villages are a shrinking sociological reality, that today, as we are seeing, that the unique character of Indian villages is declining, and it is no longer that earlier there was a divide between city and village. Today even villages are globalizing, and the unique feature of villages are missing. So if you have to study, we have to do it now, otherwise in few years it will diminish. So this was also talked about by M.N. Srinivas also in some sense. So you have to have this view that what is the contemporary standing of Indian villages, village studies. Then we talk about the second theme, which is evolution of land tenure system. So you have to have some sense of what land tenure system was in India, right from ancient times to medieval times to British times. You have to have a sense of Ryotwari, Mehelwari, and Zamindari. From If you have some understanding from history, it will be suffice, but have a sense of how it has played out. Then very important topic is land reform. So land reform, there have been numerous studies on impact of land reforms. For example, study by P.C. Joshi is very important. He has given that how in some specific areas land reforms was very successful, in some areas it was not so successful, and throughout he has given classification. Similarly, there has been work by Gail Lombard on the same, that how land reforms have played out, how different mode of production have arrived in India within the same Indian map. So what you can do as a pictographic is draw map of India and draw in different regions what is the mode of production according to Gail Lombard. So it will act as a value addition. Secondly, on land reforms, some scholars have this opinion that land reforms have had a positive impact. So that include, for example, Anand Chakrabarti, K.L. Sharma, and so forth. And even Dipankar Gupta, Rajendra Singh, they have advocated that land reforms had led to upcoming of agrarian middle class and a vocal mobilization of farmers, or in general a rising consciousness among farmers. So this has been a positive trend because it has led to positive mobilization of farming community. And whereas on the other hand, there are again some views which say, by for example DJ Bears, so he talks about that maybe land reforms were not that successful, and there have been data and graphs to show that how percentage of landlessness have increased over the period in villages, which shows that which they argue is that post land reforms, land which was not of that good quality was distributed, as a result of which farming no longer remained a profitable profession because of the rising cost of productions. So eventually it led to increasing landlessness, and percentage of agrarian income in rural income declined. And they have shown it by different data, especially if you look at Venkat Rai, if I can record correctly, and Prasad Rao. So they have given that chart. So if you use those chart, it will be very good in the answers to give it a positive view. So on land reforms, you have to have a ready-made answer. On village studies, you have to have a ready-made answer. And on evolution of this little republic, colonial view of villages, this is also a very important theme for this chapter. Thank you.